Okay, we're live and we are talking to a few people here, and we're having a little discussion about uh, the Jordan Peterson Sam Harris debate slash discussion, and try to clarify what they were getting at and how we want to get at some of the same stuff. Um, we are from a few different Facebook groups and such, and like I said, we're recording this live. It'll also be uh, up for others to see later. What I'm going to do first of all is go through everybody here and have them briefly introduce themselves, as well as perhaps say in approximately a minute to 2 or 3 minutes, like some of their understanding of the positions of Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, or you could just, clarify one or the other if you only would like to. So yeah, your name, perhaps where you're from, perhaps a little bit about what you want to get out of this. And this is the second one we've done like this. We'll probably do at least one more, and we'll do probably we'll do more like spin-off in the next few weeks, and it's good right now in the middle of this pandemic that we're still technically in to have these kind of things. So we'll start with Milo and kind of go clockwise from there, and just we'll take it from there and go over some questions and things people might want to talk about.
Okay. All right. My name's Milo. I'm from the Detroit area, Michigan. I as far as my coming at this, I think that Jordan Peterson is very much influenced by Carl Jung, among many other things, and he's kind of coming at it from a biological evolutionary standpoint. Sam Harris seems like he's kind of coming at it from a intellectual standpoint, or a rational standpoint, as much as he can. I'm looking forward to getting into the discussion. I kind of don't want to just start the discussion straight up until everybody's got a chance to introduce themselves. But
in a couple minutes.
Yeah. But yeah, I kind of come from the Jungian kind of perspective mostly, and so I want to, I hope to, in the course of this discussion, sharpen my understanding of both of these guys. I think I got my head around Jordan Peterson's positions better than I have of Sam Harris's positions, and maybe from some of you, I'll be able to understand Harris's positions a little better.
That's me.
Yeah, so I'll be coming right at you then, there, Jenner. We'll go to the next guy.
All right,
well,
go ahead, Jonathan.
If Milo's Jordan and Jenner is Sam, then I must be Brett Weinstein.
There we go.
Stein. It's
so-
Stein. Sorry, I gotta be that guy. It's Weinstein.
You know what? It's completely fine.
Literally everybody does it.
Well, there you go. Except for you.
Everybody but you.
It's the cool kids table thing. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm
So my name is Jonathan. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, the Great Smoky Mountains area. So one of the things that struck me about the Sam Harris Jordan Peterson debate was that it wasn't just that they were coming from different perspectives; it's that they had almost irreconcilable vocabularies. So they were talking about two different things, possibly the same thing, but from two different ontological standpoints. Sam Harris describes himself as a realist, both ethically and probably scientifically, even though he's not as much of a stickler for the materialist as sometimes he's made out to be. And Jordan Peterson's a Darwinian pragmatist, so he's coming at this from an evolutionary standpoint, and he's putting action at the base of ethics. So what's true is embodied in action. And Brett Weinstein sort of saved the baby in the bathwater in those discussions by sort of bringing up literal versus metaphorical truth. And so it might be two different discussions: foundations of ethics versus ontology of what's true. Those might be two different things we could go through. They might be two completely different topics, although they're probably related. But I sort of side with Sam Harris at first, and I've been progressively leaning more toward the Brett Weinstein side of things.
Go ahead, Jenner. What? Oh, you go to Hilo first. Sure. You want to go ahead, Hilo?
Yeah, it's gonna be very brief.
Okay.
I'm just Hilo from Algeria. Basically, I'm just like many people. I'm just a fan of Jordan Peterson, but I don't really know Sam Harris, to be honest. I know some of his views as a Muslim. I'm a Muslim. I know he hates us so much, but
I wouldn't go that far, but okay.
No. Hello.
that's what that's what I know.
I have to step in. I was hoping to get another Sam Harris bro in here to kind of equal out.
I'm just a spectator, man. I'm just a spectator. I don't know.
Equal out the scales a little bit.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
Sam is very critical of some of the core tenets of Islam as an ideology. He does not hate Muslims as people. He's very clear about this. And if you have not read his book that he did with Majid Nawaz, it is transformative. It is about healing. It is about recognizing that we may come from different brotherhoods, but ultimately we are all one. We are all the same. It's about coming together. This is one of the biggest barriers, I think, to the 21st century, is trying to figure out, especially if we're talking within the realms of religion and philosophy, the divide between Christianity and Islam is one that needs warriors. This is a wall, guys, and it needs people on both sides ready to tear down the wall and come together under love and common brotherhood, not to, divide into separate things. That's always been the thing. So it's one of the criticisms I hear most about Sam Harris is that he's an Islamophobe. He's a bigot against Muslims, and that's absolutely not the case. He's very concerned around human rights issues that are baked into the Quran. So when we talk about things like women's liberation, the burqa, freedom from literal and metaphorical slavery, those are really kind of where he comes into the discussion around Islam. And that's where really I come into the discussion too, because I want to be very respectful of knowing the temple in which I walk into. This is sacred ground, and we need to treat it like sacred ground. So sorry, that was a big roundabout, way deeper way to introduce myself, to say hi, I'm Jenner from Mindwave, and I'm really interested in transcending the planes, because especially in social discourse, we're taught to communicate pretty much here on the surface. We don't go too much higher. We don't go too much deeper. I kind of want to be the thing in between. I want to be the earth drill and the space elevator at the same time, and try to draw it all together. So I'm coming into this as a Sam Harris fan. I'm familiar with Jordan's work. I've seen all the debates, so I'm kind of qualified enough to be here. But it's really if I'm serving only any function, it's kind of to be, I guess, Sam's bulldog, to defend himself where he can't. because I understand on a deeper level a lot of his arguments. It I guess in a way that maybe many people don't. So that was a mouthful, wasn't it? Hello.
But I think Hilo may have had a little more to say before we went on the little clarification there. So I don't know if you want to say anything else to kind of clarify your position and background, Hilo, before we get into it. Hilo, can you hear me, or do you want to get? Okay, I don't know if you can hear me or it just what. Okay, so
I didn't mean to derail. That just seemed kind of extraneous. I didn't want to let that go. Unchallenged because Sam's very much not an Islamophobe.
Yeah.
He's very much on the Muslim reformer side of it with Majid Nawaz and Ayaan Hirsi Ali and other people who have been branded apostates by the Islamic State. But it's an important clarification. I couldn't sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry for breaking your cycle.
No. This is exactly why we're here. Hello. This is exactly why we're here.
Yeah.
It's we're creating the lenses through which to see the world, and it's only by coming together that we're able to do that. See through each other's eyes for a moment. So I fucking love this. I'm in love with it. I'm gonna shut up. Isaac, please go.
Hilo, did you have anything else you wanted to add, Hilo, before that we get into it?
No.
Okay.
I'm just interested in your opinions. That's all.
Sure. I will say that did bring up a good point, and that especially now with these kind of opportunities, I think all of us, other than Hilo, are we're all Americans in America, but in these groups and a lot of our discussions, we're talking to people all around the globe, and that's sort of how all these type of conversations go now. Anyway, if they get into any public format on any level, almost, it's somewhat global, and if not somewhat immediately like this, then we're all connecting to people around the world on a regular basis. So more and more we have to be thinking that way and communicating that way on a global mindset, in that we all have these different backgrounds, whether we might personally identify or whatever as a particular religion, or personally identify as whatever our goal might be from a ideological background, whether that's religious or philosophical, psychological, or whatever our goals might be, whether that's from particular school of philosophy, religion, or a mixture of those. And we want to sort of bring those together as much as we can. So I will say, before we get into some other things, since it came up, the tricky thing with the Islam thing, and Hilo can always jump in on this with probably some more experience on it. But the tricky thing is that in these type of discussions, where it's specifically dealing with religion, that's a lot of what came up in the debates, and what a lot of these Peterson Harris debates and similar ones are focused on, is terms of religion. And then it's tricky because for a long time we were trying to, as a species or society or culture or whatever, we were trying to make whatever religion, especially the main religion / set of religions, more user friendly for the masses, I guess, more like something for everyone, and something that can help everyone, and not be a harm to society or anyone that partakes in them on whatever level. And now for the most part at this point, there have been times to whatever degree that was a big problem, maybe hundreds or thousands of years ago or whatever, with Christianity and other religions. And now we're somewhat at a point in history where those have, for the most part, you could probably say evolved as ideologies or whatever, to where the world can somewhat get along with them. They've ironed out the dogma for the most part. However, with Islam or Muslims, that's still in the process, but it's a tricky thing because on one hand, it's how it's perceived, and then the other hand, it's the reality of it, which I'm sure you have a certain level of experience with, just like Christians and Christianity, whether it's from recent history or ancient history. There might be issues of how that were perceived over reality because of some, small extremist groups or whatever, similar things, with the Muslims. But that's how it comes up in these type of debates, because even if it's small fringe groups that are prone toward violence, it is examples of what to be wary of and what the concerns are with what can come about if we're not careful with religion. However, they do address that almost from the very beginning of these discussions, that it's not even just religion, it's also any ideology or dogma, like those of the 20th century with Mao and Lenin and Stalin and Hitler. They had non-religious ideologies that were just as bad or probably worse than any religious. So I don't know if you want to chime in on that before we get into some of the questions and topics that we were already planning to get in on or to get into.
Well, if you let me show you my experience
Sure.
in a bit. How can I say this? Because our religion is just, for some people, is just a pragmatic tool they use. You see, I came to this religion. I was born a Muslim, of course.
Sure.
Sometime in my youth, in my teenage years, I came to know a lot of movies, like most people, a lot of outside culture, a lot of outside influence. Of course, there were some suspicions about this religion, because you see, there's not only Islam in the world. There's other religions, there's other ideologies, there's open-minded people, if you can say. There's a lot of different point of views.
Sure.
So what I try to do is to prove if this religion is worth living with or not. If it's holding me back, or if it's harm to me and other people, why continue with it? Even though a lot of people are born with it and continue to live with it, and not bother ask these questions. It's a difficult question, of course, but a necessary one. You see, because it's a way of life. It's not just a word or two. I'm a Muslim, and it's a way of life. And so many people are just worried about the name. I'm a Muslim, but he doesn't bother to know his true religion, what he teaches, what he teaches, what he can live with and prosper in life. So when I knew the core of this religion is the book, is the Quran. the book tells you so much that you can believe. I'm not here to preach or anything. I'm just telling you. When I read the Islam, the Quran, I just how can I describe it? I just felt something is true, extremely true, not just true. It's the word of your creator. I just felt if not this book, it's the snow book. You know, it just showed me that it's really the core thing to study, to know more, to extract the wisdom from. It's not just like any book you just read and throw away and just not contemplate about it. And just to clarify something else, it's not like other books. Like I'm sorry to say that, but the Bible has a lot of authors and has a lot of changes over time. So when you read it, you find so many conflicting things and so many incoherent arguments and so many stuff. So when you read it, many preachers will tell you that you have to contemplate more because it's not on the surface; it's inside. Unlike the Quran is obvious. The words are obvious. Like when you read something, instantly when you know the language and when you know the background, it's a book, and of course it's not that simple. Everyone can understand it. You have to know the language. You have to know the background. That's why we have prophets. The prophet teaches you the context of those preachers. The preaching, the wisdom in it can be understood with the actions of the prophets. Otherwise, it can be revealed or written anonymously, like so many people believe it's written. It's written by certain authors and no experience or no prophet. No, you feel me? So it's just
So let me just clarify that, and then we'll segue to some of the things that we wanted to get into anyway, which is one of the great things about these kind of discussions of ours and of Jordan and Sam is we start to see the commonalities and coming together of a lot of different viewpoints and ideologies and all of that. Because what I think is sort of to a large degree beautiful is if you look at all of the main religions that are 1,000 years old or more, and now they are we've got 4 or 5 as the primary religion, where each of them has about 1 billion or more people roughly. They, even when they have those debatable issues, you could call it, or those things that people are unsure about, or the things that people have been debating about for at least hundreds or sometimes thousands of years, the commonalities or the principles that are underneath all that is where I feel like everybody kind of comes together. And where I think we were saying, Sam and Jordan are kind of coming together, but they have these language issues. So kind of with that, we'll segue into this idea of metaphorical versus literal truth, because I think a lot of what someone's perspective like Sam is getting at is it almost just clarifies that someone in the background of a religious background or a religious text, it's a faith. It's not it's not all a literal thing, but it's a faith that the followers follow, and it's a faith that we can draw wisdom from, like you mentioned, your experience drawing wisdom from the Quran. The same thing with Christian texts, as well as Hindu and Buddhist text and others, where we can't exactly always take it literal. Although what I try to do personally, and we can start to get into this in the discussion, because it's partly a Jungian thing and it's partly just all kinds of background, is you want to sort of hold the duality of, if I take this as literal or if I take it as metaphorical, how would either one cause me to act or behave in the world or see the world, and then try to do the best action. So in other words, if believing in a God or these different religious principles, religious ideas would cause me to behave A or B compared to if I behave as if they're not, then what would happen? How would I behave? And then try to act the best way. So I think with that, we'll start to get into it from some of the other guys on the idea of literal truth and metaphorical truth, and how to deal with them and reconcile with them. And then from there, we'll kind of go to the idea of these, innate value structures and interpretive structures to reconcile facts and morality. So I don't know if anyone in particular wants to take it from there.
I can explain it.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
So the idea of metaphorical truth, I think Brett Weinstein coined that term, is so you can have a literal truth. So protons exist. Sure. That's a literal truth. And that's as far as it goes. But a metaphorical truth is a truth that it's not literally true, but if you behave according to the fact that it's false, you come out less ahead than you would if you behaved according to the fact that it's true. So an example of that is guns. So any wise person is going to treat a gun as if it's loaded. Now, if you handed me a gun, I'm going to look at the magazine, I'm going to check that it's unloaded. And if I give it to somebody and they give it right back to me, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to look like a nutcase doing it because I just did it. I know it's unloaded, but the people who
not to anyone in the desert, motherfucker, you will look like a responsible human being. They're like, of course you check that shit.
Exactly.
Damn.
Right. So treating all guns as if they're loaded, even though it's not literally true, it's more useful for survival than treating them as whatever they are. And so Brett Weinstein would have called that metaphorically true. And he made the point that metaphorical truths are the truths that evolution and natural selection embed into organisms. It's not the thing that what's literally true isn't relevant to survival. It's metaphorical truths that are relevant to survival and natural selection. So that's one of the interesting points that he made, I think, on Rogan's podcast, I think. So the thing that is useful about metaphorical truth with respect to the debate between Harris and Peterson is that it's one of the babies in the bathwater that sort of connects their viewpoints. So Peterson's concerned about what would you call it? The evolutionary significance of narrative and the ability of narrative to codify morality and values. And what Brett Weinstein pointed out is that these narratives, they might not be literally true, but they may provide advantage to a group or a culture, that if the culture adheres to them, they come out ahead of those who wouldn't have adhered to them, despite whether they're literally true or not. And so that's the evolutionary utility of metaphorical truth, and that's how it relates to religions.
This is where this is one of the points where I wanted to jump in on this point of, turn my mic, metaphorical truth. I feel like when we invoke metaphor, we kind of detach it a little bit too much from the human experience, because what we're really talking about isn't metaphorical. It's not some kind of abstract thing that we're making up. It is a real thing that people feel and experience. So I'm trying to move in my own vocabulary. And fucking Jonathan, that you nailed it in your intro. That like largely the problem is just irreconcilable vocabulary, where we're not using words right, basically. Which, as a weird species of monkey that just recently came down from the trees, it's amazing we can get this far in the first place. But it is largely a language problem, which is why me as an outsider, I'm seeing and thinking that Sam and Jordan don't actually disagree as much as the you know, as much as the landscape would have us think. I think they're actually much closer to the axis, much closer to the center of the teeter-totter on this particular question. That we're just using different words to describe the same thing. And this has been like, this is largely, I think, on a global scale. On a global scale, this is where most of our conflict is actually coming from.
Yeah.
It's largely just a language game, and it's not actual disagreement, because actual disagreement is very different from we're just using two different words for the same thing. And I was not planning on digging into theology too much, but Allah and God is a beautiful example, because they literally mean the same thing. This is a translational thing. This is a different language. But the reason that I can say that is because they're taken from the same source, the God of Abraham. You know, in the same way that we compare Judaic texts to modern Christian texts, it all kind of ties back to the same thing. It really is the Rosetta Stone of doing philosophy that we need to understand, is that we all come from different lands, from different tribes out in the wilderness, but when we come to this space, we need to understand that we might be talking about the same things, but we're using different words for it, because that's how humans work. Do you know what I mean? So this is something we need to be very hyper consciously aware of. Is that the words themselves are kind of the problem.
Well, I'll kind of clarify that, and that's one of those things that I feel like can be very true, but also very confusing, and in some ways, depending on the context, not true, because it all depends on the situation, because like this is the whole thing of the endless battle, seemingly endless battle in the Middle East over a plot of dirt of like who if it's whose holy land it is, or those kind of things, where
it's humanity's holy land. It's our holy land, motherfuckers. Capital O with a big asterisk. It's our holy land. Is that not the answer to that question? Did I just solve it in 2 seconds? You're welcome.
Well, it is, but this is something that we kind of get into, with more of the overarching what Jordan Peterson gets at, and what Carl Jung get at, which is the idea of ideas fight for their own survival, which is somewhat the sort of meme theory from Dawkins. That the tricky thing about the meme theory from Dawkins is that it's sort of an atheist idea / evolutionary idea that they like, but see, they somewhat think that they invented it, and they somewhat did, but it came out of the same place, which is our cognitive structure or our interpretive structure, or however you want to call it. And then, but they don't like it because it's almost to a large degree the same exact thing as how that archetypes operate, and similar to how spirits operate, at least in terms of ideas. So these ideas, and there's another thing that Jordan Peterson really gets into is these ideas fight for their survival, and in the process of fighting for their survival, it's sort of a something these guys all talk about is sometimes they will possess people, or ideological possession, and in that process they will cause the world to they'll transform the world. And sometimes, and it's like we have to deal with what is literally true and what is not true, just like whatever the religion is, or whatever the background is, you may or may not believe in whatever religion, but sometimes they cause a lot of good things to come into the world, including hospitals and counseling for people and relationships for people. And then they cause also wars and violence. And of course, that's not a universal thing that they're going to universally do one or the other. They'll probably more apt to do the whole spectrum of, good and evil, like any other ideology. But so they fight for their survival, and we are, we're almost like the intermediaries. Us human beings that are not possessed by them are sort of the intermediaries to try to, sort that out, like Jordan and Sam try to do, which is a lot of their goal. And we try to make sense of it so that it's almost, sometimes I use the example of there have been serial killers who, and this is on the topic of, metaphorical versus literal truth. Sometimes there have been serial killers who have said there was a dog, whether they thought it was possessed by a devil or whatever, or some spirit, but a dog that told them to kill people. Now, of course, that's not literally true. And we are also not saying that it's metaphorically true. There was really a spirit telling a guy to kill people, and so we got to go deal with dog devils or whatever. But because it caused somebody to die in the world, in a large degree, it's almost like a literal truth, or it's become a literal truth because it caused that thing to happen in the world. So that's a lot of the. So I want to hear from Milo, since we really haven't, and we'll riff on this idea. And I think Jenner has some things to get to, but I want to hear a minute from Milo on this metaphorical versus literal truth idea.
Literal truth is very strongly aligned with scientific thinking. When you're an empiricist and you're looking at facts, and you're drawing conclusions, rational conclusions, it has this linear quality to it. And Jung, recognized that in the psyche, there's a tendency toward materialism and a tendency towards spirituality. And but when a person becomes one-sided, whether it be toward literal materialism, they suppress the spiritual archetypes within themselves, which are going to erupt. They're going to attach themselves to anything that might come in close contact with it.
Yeah, it's like we're like this intermediary between spirit and matter, which is one of the things.
Yeah, and I think that the metaphorical it's as if the literal has become meaningful. The metaphor is a way of planting something deep into the heart, and you can't, a literal understanding it's something that happens in the head.
Right.
And the metaphor can
Mhm.
become a container in which some of our deep, something deep in our heart can touch a metaphor. It can't
Yeah,
really,
unconscious.
and when it latches onto something literally, it always goes askew.
Oh, this is so good. You guys, there is an intermediary between those two things. This is not a 0 and 1 thing. And this is my biggest problem with largely the debate there, is because clearly we have objective truth. H2O is H2O, for example. The oxygen we breathe, it's O2. Those are facts. 2 + 2 = 4. Those are objective truths. And then we get into metaphorical truths, which is kind of tangential off at an angle, which is like, well, the sky is blue. Well, that's kind of subjective and dependent on certain things, but that's metaphorically true. Yes, the sky is blue. I think that the missing piece to this part of it is the personal truth, which is something that I didn't really understand until fairly recently, was that we can be living entirely different lives, entirely different subjective experiences. We can see the exact same thing. We can watch the exact same play, for example, and walk away from it feeling very different. So even if there is a hard truth, if there is a literal truth, red is red, it is this wavelength of light, individually, personally, and interpersonally, your version of red won't necessarily match my version of red. And when we agree on what is red, that is the magic thing there. It's not that is the magic happening. It's
Like
that,
an intersubjective truth.
it is intersubjective, but we can't discount the value of personal truth. And this is why I think we have a hard time talking to more fundamentalist people, more people who they feel a personal relationship to something that no amount of rationality is going to convince them out of, because it wasn't rationality that got them into there in the first place. It was more like having parents. It was more like a default state, a garden you were born into. So if there's an outlet, if there's anywhere out, it's in the empowerment of the individual to say that as much wisdom as you're looking for in the ancient prophets or in the best minds on earth, really the most powerful, if you're doing that activity, really the most powerful wisdom that you can find is actually in your own mind. And you will be way more powerful as a source of light in this domain than you think you would be otherwise. This is my new whole mission in life, is getting people to discover how powerful they are on this stuff, because it's beyond it. There is a transcendent level to it, to where there is a real part. There's a fundamentally real part that we can describe in ones and zeros and plus and minuses and math. There's that part. And then there's the human part, which we don't have equations for that yet, but it's very real. It's not a metaphorical, abstract thing. It's here. It's in the chest of the beating heart of the monkey that we all are. Milo, sorry, you were saying something.
That's all right. Hey, the thing I think that when a distinction that may be worth making is when you're talking of objective truth, especially like in the sciences, you know, you have a theory, you run it through the scientific method, it proves to be false. You can throw it in the garbage can, and you start over with a new theory, and you can go through another thing, and you try to, and when you prove something to be false, you can throw it away.
Mm-hmm.
No harm done. When it comes to the psyche, however, you can't just throw things away, because everything that exists in the psyche is a fact of the psyche.
Yeah.
And the only way to deal with falsity in the psyche is to transform it somehow, to compensate for it somehow, to bring about a certain balance inside, so that you in the psyche, when it comes to truth in the psyche, you're working under a slightly different set of laws as you would in a scientific laboratory. You can't suppress a false thought. You have to like compensate. You have to work. You have to struggle with it, and you have other factors other than pure rationality. You have irrational factors. You have emotions that come out from the unconscious that you can't quite get your head around. And this is a struggle that goes on in the psyche in terms of finding a place for them, and rationality is just one of many pieces of our psyche. It's not, we can't expect that to do all the work. And I think that's kind of where Jordan Peterson was going from, is like, you know, you can't, I think he struggled with Sam Harris, because it seemed like Sam Harris was like, everything was based on a rational conclusion that would be inaccessible to people of lesser intelligence. You know, not everybody's a philosopher. Not everybody's going to be able to, you know, sit and talk like we're talking. But that isn't even to say that even the smartest guy in the world cannot defeat the things of the unconscious with their rationality.
Right.
And another way to say that, or go ahead.
You know, if it's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. If you think you can use your rationality to completely contain the unconscious, it's just not. You know, you need some other tools, and I think that's where metaphor and embodied truth, which I think Jordan Peterson went to, is, you know, you need containers that can handle this stuff. And the religious traditions have containers for this stuff, and I think Peterson's concern is that, you know, whatever construction that we build outside of a religious tradition, if you will, that it has the weakness of not having a whole set of metaphoric, symbolic, embodied representations that can handle the kind of irrationality that's in our psyche. Because in that irrationality is what we saw in the Soviet Russia and with Mao, and we saw it in Nazi Germany. These things come out if there isn't a place for them. In the so I'll let anybody jump in.
Well, another way to say that is that minds don't change because they wanted to change. Right. Minds are changed because there's a transformative experience taking place.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm a stickler for being rational and scientific too, but the fact of the matter is, minds are as deterministic as the rest of physics is, unless there's something else about consciousness that we don't know. Maybe quantum physics is involved, but at the very least of it, we are aware of our own unconscious processes. So because of that, minds don't always change just because we want them to change. They're changed because of something else outside of the mind that impacts it.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and it depends. One thing that they get into, well, some people, Jordan and some other people get into often, is this idea of it really depends on what you pay attention to. So what you attend to kind of transforms your world and the world around you. So what you're looking at and what you're focusing on, whether it's in your immediate environment or what you're working on in your head and in your life, transforms your whole world. And I think that's one like core truth to all of this, because truth and finding these kind of truths isn't just going to be like in science. There are a few things that way where we can say, particles and atoms and molecules are this and that way.
It's a lot. It's like
It's a lot.
5% of the universe, which the
Yeah.
universe is really fucking big.
Mm.
The universe is like totally huge, bro.
Mm.
But it's like
It's
we can
totally huge,
describe
bro.
5%. It's a
Yeah,
tiny percent,
if
but
that.
that 5% is a fucking lot. Don't discount that shit for a second. Holy
Yeah,
shit.
it's kind of like that's really key, because what it is that we know enough to operate, and the rest is sort of a form of faith, even in scientific terms, although scientific people often don't like terminology like that. It's like a faith journey.
Nope. Science is not a religion. I'm shutting that down now.
No, it's I know
Science
not
is
a
not a
religion,
belief
but
system. We have good evidence to believe this shit works
but
because
what you do is
we have some
because there's only
evidence.
that 5%, you're filling in the gaps with
Only
leaps of faith.
5% of what there is to know about the mathematics that governs the entire universe. Only 5%.
It's a lot, but then there's a lot more.
Are you kidding me? That's why we're alive. We're
Yeah.
there to figure out the rest. We're there to
Right.
get it to 96, motherfucker.
Yeah, we are.
However humbly, we are tiny monkeys on a itty bitty little dirt planet covered in water.
All right.
That is why we're here.
Yeah.
All right, on that subject, Jenner, then you say that science isn't faith, so I'm curious as to how you make meaning out of that,
Okay, let's go there, but let me
All right,
see, but hold on, because that's a little bit of a divergence, and we can do that, but because that was
Okay.
kind of like where we're next going to go. But let me see for a second. I know we're trying to get to hear from Toyam, who may have been having some connection issues, but I want to hear if he's got anything to say and introduce himself real quick if he's got his connection issues resolved here. And it's 4 a.m. where he's at, but I don't know if he's resolved all of his connection issues. And by the way, if I mute anyone's microphone, it's just because of noise issues.
I'm so sorry, my internet is breaking up.
That's okay. We can kind of hear you, but anyway, do you have anything to add while we can kind of hear you? Otherwise, that's unfortunate, and we can get text from you, and we'll do another one, and hopefully you'll have your connection resolved next week.
Where are you?
Okay. I think he's having connection issues. He sent me a private message. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. You got anything to add while we can hear you? We can hear you now. He's in a third world country.
Fucking A, man.
Okay. We might have to.
Hey, guys.
Okay.
As far as religion goes,
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So as far as religion goes, you just have to and comprehend it to be able to understand it and according to science.
Okay, we lost him, and it sounds like he had some interesting points to make, and that's
Oh
unfortunate.
shit! That was so. Do we know where in the world he was?
He private messaged me that he's in a third world country. He can probably still hear us.
That is That is a problematic, sir. As with your skin tone and cisgendered biology, that is extremely problematic for you to say third world. I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah. Although
You're gonna get canceled on Twitter, Isaac.
Yeah.
Do you understand how this works
No,
in the 21st century?
No, he said that to me in the private message as to why he's having issues with his internet. He said, "I'm in a third world country and my internet is breaking up." So at any rate,
Elon Musk, get on it.
Yeah, get a Skynet, you freaking idiot! Hurry
Jesus
up!
Christ. Do you guys do you know what I was shopping for on Amazon?
What is that? Is that a button thing or a trophy? What is it?
It's a lamp, motherfucker. It's a desk lamp.
Oh, all right. I support that decision. Get yourself
Heart container. It's Zelda, motherfuckers.
Okay, sorry I don't play a lot of Zelda. Jeez.
You have to be one of those nerds.
I never got into Zelda. I was a little bit too
fucking
poor
kidding
for
me?
Zelda,
I revoke your nerd. I revoke your nerd card.
Hey, I was a poor nerd when I was young. Okay, all right, fine. I'm a.
If you don't understand why I immediately needed to go on Amazon and look for an LED lit up heart container light that was like legit Ocarina of Time Zelda era shit, we are not friends, sir. Oh Jesus, right. You guys. Okay. I hate to do this. I gotta swing my dick around. Yeah. I really want to hear from Hilo more because Hilo's here, and I'm just like amazed. Talk to a. This is we need to shift the focus to you. This is an amazing thing. How did you find your way into this particular circle to find your way into this stream with all of us? That's an amazing story because you're on the other side of the planet, man. Like, that's cool. I don't know if you guys know this. Sure. That's objectively cool.
It is. No, it's not a big thing. I just found your group. I found your group and sidebar of the Facebook page. Just found your group and just participated to see what people, how people react with one another about Jordan. That's all.
Wow. All right. Fine. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Isaac, are you busy?
Oh no, I was just looking something up, but
it's fine. It's I was giving you a softball, man. It's fine.
Oh, sorry.
Do we have live comments? Oh, bro, we haven't even done these in a long time.
We do. Although this is the guy that was just here and he's having connection issues.
Okay.
As long as science. This is cool, and what I want to get to is, and the thing about these comments, they're great and I appreciate them, but what we usually end up doing is getting to the same point anyway. We were diverging for a minute before we had those connection issues with this gentleman. We're diverging to another point that Milo brought up, which was I think one that we were getting to anyway. What were you saying a minute ago before that connection issue with our sixth person, Milo?
Okay, the comment was made that science there's no faith from the I'm curious, if there is no faith, then how do you derive meaning then from it? I guess this gets back into the mediating of facts and truth.
Values, yeah.
He is itching to say something right now.
Well, facts and values.
Yeah. Faith is belief without evidence. Science, the reason that it works is because it tests the same every time. Anybody can do the same experiment anywhere in the world and come to the same conclusion. That's what a scientific consensus is, okay? Which is it's not the same thing as a law like Newton's laws. Okay, Newton's laws of mathematics, which describe on a very basic level how gravity works, those are true. Those are literally true. You can run the things. If you try to take Newton's equations and apply them to a black hole, you're going to have a very hard time. You need to bring in Einstein's theory of general relativity to even get close, and even then you're not going to get close to the actual literal truth of what's happening at the center of a black hole, because the numbers that we have, the zeros and ones, it doesn't make sense when you get down that far. Everything breaks apart. It is kind of fractal. We can understand things at certain scales. We can understand what it's like to be a however foot tall monkey on a planet called the Earth that is approximately this size, that has a moon. That we can understand things on those scales, but when we try to go down very deep to the fundamental nature of what reality is built of, the building blocks of life, it gets very difficult. And when we try to reach to what the stars are, what the entire universe is, we are helplessly incapable. Helplessly. We are the single grain of sand on the beach that is utterly just like that part of it. The same thing that makes you feel so small is also the thing that makes you one of the most powerful things in the universe. It makes you the part that's able to flip that, to reverse that, to observe upon it and take action to make things different. You know, if you don't like the way something is, that's your call to do something better. If you don't like somebody's speech, that's your call to be louder and have a better message, you know, and not necessarily try to tread on anybody's, you know, along the way. You don't have to put people down along that mission. It's just about, this is the process for me, and philosophy for me is like science. For me, science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. And I think philosophy is the same way. It is.
Yeah, well, and let me clarify. I think what a lot of what Milo is getting at and what was getting at in those discussions between Sam and Jordan, which was this idea that, okay, we know the boiling point of water. We know to some degree what atoms do and protons do. We know to some degree what H2O is, and a lot of those facts. But we could have like millions and billions of facts, whether they want to call that 5% of the universe or whatever percentage, or enough to sustain life and all those things. But the question is, so let's say we have a billion facts that a person knows or that humanity knows, whether you want to call that billions or trillions of facts. So we've got all those facts, however scientific or whatever that they might be, and maybe even include metaphorical facts to some degree or another. Maybe even include psychological facts to some degree or another, like we mentioned a little bit. But you've got all those facts, and then you have to decide every morning if you're going to get out of bed and why, and if you're going to eat breakfast or not and why, if what you're going to have for lunch, if you're going to do something violent or something benevolent, if you're going to do any number of trillions of possibilities you can do from minute to minute, and the trajectory you're going to choose from your life and why, which is kind of what we get into a little bit in this idea of meaning. Because if you consciously observe the facts and then try to participate in the facts and the unfolding of facts, then you partake in the game, which is something that it's a subject or sort of on we may get into a little bit more. Then so there has to be a reason, which is the idea of meaning. There has to be a reason of why you do anything and not do other things. And how do we get from the fact to action, and what brings that all about? And I want to hear a little bit from Jonathan on that idea.
Yeah, that was the thing that Sam and Jordan got hung up on.
Right.
They just would not make progress on that, despite how much Jordan was actually the one pushing for it. I don't know what your thoughts on this, Jenner, are, but Sam Harris basically excused it away by, I think he used the phrase bootstrapping.
Yeah.
Which is, so I don't know what you think, because I think that he was dodging that when Jordan asked him what the intermediary structure is that extracts values from facts. And Sam Harris just said, well, at some point you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I don't know how true that is, but I think in some sense that's kind of a dodge, because you could go into a lot more detail about that with regard to moral intuitions, our evolved ethics and our evolved behavior, how, all that stuff. But I'm curious as to what you think about bootstrapping up.
Well, I think that particular, if we're even going to call that a metaphor, it's a thing for a reason. One can't do that because of how physics works. You can't pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, because motherfuckers, that's how gravity works. And it's within the Mindwave universe, I have my own mixed metaphors thing, because I love this failed, you can't do that because that's not how the world works thing. Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is like a thing for you can't do that.
Right, it's a bad analogy.
This ties this.
Let me clarify that. Let me clarify that just a bit.
You're stepping on my deck. It's fine. It's go.
No,
go.
Let me clarify that a bit. Maybe they didn't clarify this enough. It's a tricky term, but I feel like a metaphor, so to speak, that works better, but it's sort of technically the same thing, is to boot up, and the same exact way that a computer boots up.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, because
suit up, put on your little fancy,
which is also similar.
Sure.
Because this idea goes into how that we've discussed what we are consciously, and how we get to how we act consciously, how we behave in the world, and all those things. And that's been a part of the discussion for at least 100, or I don't know, at least probably hundreds of years. And it comes from the idea of when a human being is born into the world, when there's a baby, is that baby, to what degree is that baby a blank slate, like all of us once were, and to what degree is the things that our behaviors that are going to unfold, to what degree are they encoded? Like, for example, right when we're born, almost the only thing that we're encoded to do almost immediately is to grab a boob, is to start nursing, because that's basically our only job at that point, is to grab boob, put it in our mouth, and survive, because that's our milk for life. Now,
I know where he's going with this.
I'll just wrap this up, because from there, as you boot up, it goes to the nature versus nurture debate that's been going on forever. And the reality, and this is sort of what it's a Kantian thing that goes back roughly 1,000 years or more. It's also a Plato thing, but it's the idea that we are born probably mostly, you could call it a set of potentialities, and then over time we we unlock those potentialities by interacting with our environment, which is really crucial. Is the idea how we interact with our environment and the world will determine what truth is for us as individuals and societies on different levels. So to the point there is that to boot up is this idea that we're just kind of born with these potentialities that for the most part we know instinctively don't punch babies or kick puppies. But then the tricky thing is, why do we know that and how do we know that? And, like we talked about last time, was this idea that they talked about in the debate or discussion was that instinctively we know that fire is hot and we shouldn't go into it. But there may be exceptions to any and all of those kind of rules. So like they use the example, I think, Jordan, that sure, we want to avoid fire probably for 100%, except there may be exceptions, like sometimes we
like
can run into a
having to
burning
cook
building and save a
food
baby or
keep
all those kind of
yourself
things.
warm. Fire
Right.
has
All those.
great-
So,
Yes.
and that was the thing. Probably when we first started harnessing fire, it was a really scary thing. But over so many hundreds or thousands of years, we learned all the best ways to use it. So
I think it was probably like 1 or 2 generations tops.
well,
Humans
well,
are
no,
smart.
true. But then over time, we learned how to domesticate it more and more, and now we can flip a lighter or turn on a stove. It's become more and more domesticated, and more we know how to use it and be safe with it. And it wasn't even that long ago, less than 200 years ago, we were still lighting up all of our homes with kerosene lamps, which was very dangerous, and there were fires all the time, and we barely had fire departments. So this is just an example of how that over time we interact with things in our environment, and then we transform them into something that also transformed us and transform our world. There's always that back and forth. So that's, I think, a lot of where they're trying to get with this. Because pulling yourself up by the bootstraps is where the term boot up really comes from, which is this idea. It's the same thing with a computer, which is these processes coming together. Like when you don't really see it anymore the way that our computers turned on, but more so before, what you would see a computer boot up when you turn it on 10 or 20 years ago, where they would say, here's all the, things coming online. It's the same thing.
Yes, well, see, in this motherfucker, this is where I'm like,
but go ahead.
This makes sense in the Star Trek vision of the future that we all have. This makes sense in a Type 1 civilization. Communism is not going to work in a Type 0 civilization. It's just not. It's a technological problem. We have to get past.
Do you want to clarify
beyond
what you mean by Type 1 versus Type 0 civilizations?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Well,
is that
for everyone.
I assume all the people who listen are nerds. But it's the type scale. Oh, fuck. I'm going to have to remember that off the top of my head. Okay, so we're at 0. Okay. Once we get to 1, we can harness the entire energetic output of the entire sun. Did I get that right? We're capturing all of the solar energy from the sun and being able to use that productively. That's Type 1. Type 2, expanding out further, being able to use the energy output of the entire universe. Or galaxy. Fuck. Okay. See, this is why...
So right now we're transition between 0 and 1.
We are between 0 and 1.
Okay.
We are, a lot of these things will simply be resolved by the fact that we have reached a level where these things become irrelevant. They become obsolete in a way that we will find.
Let me make this point briefly. Is that this
we
is
will find
kind of,
this humorous, like we find 8 tracks and shit.
Yeah, and like let me make this point real quick. That this is one of those things that we can easily say is like, even if you want to say a person is a scientific realist, that things like that, and I'm not discounting them or disqualifying them, but things like that can become scientific faiths, but more so often in that a lot of times in science, you say, well, this and this and this are a gap, and then people from the scientific mindset will say, we'll figure that out one day. You know, when there's gaps in their theories, whether it's evolutionary or going into the future and everything else, they'll usually say, oh, we'll figure that out one day, and which is really a statement of faith.
This is the thing, and I needed you to bring me back, Isaac. Thank you. To science as to what it actually is and what it isn't,
and how it gets us to act.
Because this is not. And when he invoked this in Sam's moral landscape argument, I said the thing that he didn't include in that was the scale thing, from the micro down to the macro. Yeah. He didn't include a resolution scale in his painting of the moral landscape, which absolutely needs to be there. I understand you're getting kind of deep into esoteric nonsense when you're trying to paint something that complex. But if you're an artist, for example, like I am, and you're trying to paint a landscape, I try to paint landscapes with sound. Doing that with sound waves, it's a very different kind of fucking thing. But it is kind of the same thing. We're trying to get at something before language.
But what we're trying to get at is that's very important. But and I'll let Milo chime in too, but we're trying to get at, there's all that morality on the landscape, so to speak, and we're still trying to understand it. And that's one thing I hope to, get from your perspective more. But how and why does it get us to behave one way versus another way?
Through the self. And this is why I start to sound super crunchy, because I myself have been a lifelong atheist. I've never had a personal faith because I don't think it comes from out there. I think it actually comes from in here. I think it comes from inside. If there is anything that people are calling God, it's not something out there that we're looking for. If anything, it's what we're looking for out there. It's the same thing, but it's also inside of us. It's the same thing.
So Jenner, would you be saying then that you have faith in the self? That's what it sounds like to me.
In a non, there is a difference here. There's a distinction between recognition of self and egotism, or narcissism, for example, like, and this is why this is another one of these trippy things kind of creeping into this domain. I'm like, you guys realize that, like, they figured this shit out a long time ago in, like, agoras and bathhouses and shit in ancient Greece, and we just lost all that knowledge. It just burned to the ground. Like, all this work has already been done. We're just we're stumbling into ancient ruins here and doing the same thing, and it's kind of beautiful in a really human way, but it's that, guys. Like,
well, okay, let me clarify a couple of things there. One, okay, our psyche, this is kind of what they're getting at in the discussions with Jordan and Sam. Our psyche / brain, humanity, mind, whatever you want to call it, is an interpretive structure of what we are and what the world is and how individuals participate in it. And so when you say God / morality and how we act, it's in the world, and it's in the world of facts, but ultimately what we do with that comes from inside and not from out there in some mystical thing, which is to a large degree true and what a large percentage of people would agree on.
If there's a larger outside thing, it's us, bro. It's you and me.
Yeah, right.
It's humanity. Humanity is the thing reining the cattle in. And you know what I mean? It's conversations like this. Yeah. It's us. It's not some kind of ethereal, supernatural thing that's outside of it. The process we're really talking about is the thing that we're doing right now, and it is a verb. That's what I was saying. Science is a verb and philosophy is a verb. It's a thing that you do, it requires kind of cattle ranchers of the sorts, or white blood cells of the political discourse, if you want to draw it into biology. But it really is the same thing, and it's literally the thing that we're doing right now. That's what's doing it.
Okay, so this gets onto a couple points that we wanted to get onto, and we'll see. But what that is because it's inside of me, it's inside of you five guys and our listeners, anybody else in the future that listens or whatever. It's inside Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Brett Weinstein, Douglas Murray, and everything else. It's not just inside of one of them. It's inside of all of us, which means as it's inside myself, as it's inside of Jenner, Jonathan, Milo, everybody else,
potential energy.
Inside of one of us, and it's outside of all of us, and it's also in our whole environment, how that we interpret the environment, how that we interact with the environment.
Yes.
So what that means is, one, it's inside and outside, and it's how that we interact with it as individuals and collective, and it's also that we barely are understanding it, but we have enough understanding to continue that process. And that process, and this is where they get into a little bit of the debate, is that process is what's often called the logos process, which is the process of coming to truth. And that goes into scientific process, but also in all kinds of processes for morality and religion and everything else. And so that's what we're doing, but we know enough about it to get as much as we can out of it. Go ahead, Milo.
It's the 5% thing, motherfucker. That's what I was saying. We know this much.
We're still learning about it.
It's the origin story. This is this is the beginning. Milo, please.
Let me expand a little bit. Jenner said about he finds it inside.
Yeah.
And I think that whether you look at the Christian mystics or the Sufi mystics, or throughout, you'll find them speaking that language of finding God within. I mean, Jung even said, from an empirical standpoint, I can't tell the difference between God and the self. Ultimately, when he empirically looks at the psyche, it's a matter of faith to call it God or to call it self. He called it self, and so I think that, you know, what might end up happening is you've got people of faith may be experiencing something very similar to a straight up atheist who's sincerely looking within themselves, and we just call it but the atheist is unwilling to make that leap to call it something, you know, other than themselves. Go ahead, Jenner. You see?
No, I didn't even really ring the bell. It is that, man. It is, we're using different words for the same thing, and I think the sooner we all realize that, we'll go, oh, okay, because humans are complicated, stupid, fucked up ass monkeys, and we all use different words for stuff, and we all express ourselves differently. And English as a language, for example, is a totally fucked up, just like grammatically, verbally. It's just a nonsense language, which is very hard to make sense in anyway. But trying to put that into text, trying to put a complicated thought into text these days is just, what? Like, no, so you
Jenner,
can't even do that.
You know, I just, as you look deep into yourself and you sincerely dig into that and experience yourself, you're in essence having a personal relationship with God, according to the language of somebody else.
Okay.
And
radical. It's totally radical for me, because let me establish here. I'm a Sam Harris bro. Okay, I'm a lifelong atheist. I'm culturally Christian. I've never been an adherent of the faith. But it was through what we're doing here. This process now, it is a verb, coming together and doing this thing that I understood. It was after I exposed myself to enough other people, enough other humans and their stories, many of which were torturous soul torture to go through and listen to the struggles that were people were going through and having to process that and cycle it out. It was through that I understand. Finally, after I was 33 when I understand what God was, because I didn't get it. I didn't understand what people are talking about. I'm like, oh, is there some guy living up there in the clouds? Because if he's up there, he's a fucking asshole. He can suck my dick. I didn't understand what people meant, and it was through this process of trying to connect with other people and understand where people are at, to where it was like, oh, I actually get what they mean now. I get why that's the stand-in word. I don't think it's the right word. I think there's a better word, and it's our job to find it.
Okay, and I would say that these are, it's tricky because on one hand, you want to come to an understanding of what works for you. So in other words, like, for example, Hilo might say Allah, and that's fine. That's cool. And then one of us might say God or even Jesus, and that's great.
It literally means the same thing, except Jesus is also a prophet in Islam. Hello. I'm just saying.
I think it's worth. I think it's. I think it's worth noting that whatever we call it God, we call it self, we call it whatever we call it. Okay, let's just say that the thing that we call it. Okay.
Sure.
It becomes contaminated to a certain degree by our own psychological complexes. It becomes contaminated by our attachments, our prejudices, our certain dogmas, these things. So it's not like all things are not necessarily equal.
Yeah.
I think I find it helpful, as you read through, like I like to read like a lot of mystical type texts, and you read about these mystics, and there's a great and they all are, whether it's in the Sufi tradition or the Christian tradition, they all talk about purity of the heart is important in order to have a more pure experience of God, self, whatever you want to call it. We don't have, in this group here, it's something that we can all agree on is So I don't think that you can say necessarily that we all got a good hold on it. I'm not going to claim that I've got.
It's an endless process, at least a lifelong process.
Nobody's got a good hold on it. That's kind of the point. We're all born broken.
Well, and so a lot of what we're trying to do, as humanity have been trying to do, probably for all known history, give or take, is this is what I was saying a second ago, is that we try to figure out what works for us, whatever we want to call it, whether we believe it's the same thing or not. We say this works for me, whether we call it the self or we give it a name of God, or whatever we call it, or we just call it humanism or liberalism. And there's a lot of similar philosophies to that. Then it's like, this works for us, but then because no individual is ever going to be just an individual on the island, we have to reconcile with the past of thousands of generations, and that potentially there will be thousands of generations in the future, and that there's going to be billions of people that will live on the earth with us. And so we have to reconcile that a lot of different and the collective psyche and the collective culture and mind and consciousness, so a lot of it is the idea of free speech, the logos principle, and then it'll come down to some basic principles of, we talked about this a little bit last time, of how to coexist, which will be like, okay, if anybody wants to be any particular religion, go for it, but here's some things that are basically how we coexist. One of them, or one chief among them, has to be, let's not be violent or physically forceful. Another has to be along those same lines. Let's try to harbor free speech to the highest degree that we can. And then in that should emerge, for the most part, the most truth possible on both of those levels, because then, and if you really have, I believe that if you really have faith in any particular God, whether you want to call it the self or an actual transcendent God, personal God or not, I believe that if you really have good, true, legitimate faith in whatever you say that your God is, you will believe that God will prove himself. So if I believe that Allah is God or Jesus is God or anything else, and I say, go for it, individuals and the whole world, be free in individually and free speech and not violent, and try to prove it, whatever it is. It might not come all at once, and it might depend on to what degree that the person seeks after that truth, and maybe you'll find a level of atheism or scientism or whatever else. That's all up to the individual, but the truth will make itself and the people free. So go ahead, Jenner. I think you have something to say.
Did you just say scientism?
That was off the top of my head. I'm just saying, you can call it scientific materialism or whatever. Scientific materialism. Or
I don't even think Sam Harris is really that much of a materialist zeros and ones. I don't think he's that much of a robot.
Some people call it faithist.
But, jeez. No,
it is a thing, but some people call it that.
Science is about what we know, which is a tiny fraction, but it is knowable, and that's the beautiful part of it. And you fucking derailed me again, man. I had the most beautiful thing.
If it's the most beautiful, I believe it'll come back to you,
Isaac.
Well, 1, 2, 3.
It's the cosmos. This is the cosmos. You know.
So now we know what Jenner's kryptonite is. Just say scientism.
Yeah.
and then we get a ram clear out of
that. You got literally, because I had notes about Dawkins' meme theory, which is absolutely how that works. But it's in terms of political discourse.
Yeah.
This is extremely Darwinian. The thing that we are calling the mainstream media is the gene pool, and us handful of people who have randomly come together on this Thursday evening, which it happens to be on my particular spot on the planet right now.
Afternoon.
It's afternoon. Hilo looks like it's in the middle of the night for you, man, right?
With ghosts in the background.
It's almost 2:00 in the morning.
That is a beautiful thing.
That
is a beautiful thing, because we're coming together and we're trying to understand. We are all coming from different backgrounds. We all learned from different books. We're all using different language, but we're talking about the same thing. And really, it is the process of trying to find the same thing.
Yeah.
It is that. I don't think we should get hung up too much on what so-and-so thinks of whatever. It really is the bigger question, which is why if somebody asks me about God, the thing people call God or Allah or whatever in the budget 5,000 other gods that there are on earth, I'm like, well, what do you really mean?
Yeah.
You know, that's the real question. And I think the real question, if we're trying to make progress with any individual, it has to be on an individual level, because you can act on a kind of larger, thing, but that has to be built off of individual empowerment and getting people to think about this shit for themselves and engaging them in a way to where they would jump on something like this. Because most of the people that I've brought into this domain never would have thought in a million years they would be getting in here and being a part of this, but this was always the goal. That was the goal of Jordan and Sam debating, was not for us to listen to them and go, oh gosh, aren't those people smart? It was for us down here to go, holy shit, oh my God, pick up the thread. Motherfuckers,
Yeah.
let's dig into the labyrinth. Let's see how much deeper we can get into this. You know?
Well, okay,
It's so much bigger.
let me expound on that real quick and maybe hear from Jonathan or anybody else on this topic. But I think it's at the core of what we're getting at is the okay. So I think what we're getting at, and all of us and those in similar debates, like the one that Jordan and Sam were having, when you say we're getting at the same thing, what that same thing, and a lot of people don't have a grasp on this, and that's fine. It's a slippery subject. What that same thing is, at least in the how we interact with each other, not as just individuals, but how we have a global culture, so to speak, is you can call it liberalism or humanism or liberal humanism, which is this idea that we're just talking about it, and it's sort of akin to the logos, but it's this idea, and it's not necessarily a Christian idea, although it is the idea, one of the core foundations of possibly Enlightenment principles, but definitely the founding of Western civilization and democracy, and definitely the United States, especially in the Constitution, which is the idea that every human consciousness on the individual level and on the national and global level, every human consciousness is important and matters. And that, which is the reason why, even if we know almost definitely that there was a mass murderer, whether that was a sometimes we make to a certain degree exceptions with like global terrorism, but I don't think we want to go in there today, but like even like a guy who blew up the Oklahoma City bomber, everybody is going to get a fair trial and everybody's going to get a vote. Yuval Noah Harari talks a lot about this, and he says, liberalism is this idea that it's in the politics, it's ultimately up to the voter. Go into the voting booth or whatever and listen to your heart. That's each individual coming to a collective agreement, sort of. And then on the consumer level, in our capitalistic system, it's the customer is always right. And in the individual level of what are you going to do? How should you act? They will say, follow your heart. And that's somewhat hard to grasp, but that is that sort of core uniting thing. Now, the reason I bring that up, and I'll want to hear from all you guys on this to whatever degree that we can, but the reason I bring that up is because I think where we have a hard time reconciling people like Jordan Peterson or Sam Harris especially, but to both of them to a large degree, I think what Jordan Peterson is trying to do is push this thing of humanism / liberalism / liberal humanism, which is what I was just saying, which is where they agree. They really agree on that. Maybe not the exact terminologies, but it's where they agree and where the vast majority of people agree on to whatever degree, although the language might be different. But here's the tricky part. The tricky part is if you're just an atheist, like, okay, I'm an atheist, not a religious person, that atheism and that science, and I won't say scientism, but scientific materialism or a variation of that, it just in the science and just in the rationality, it does not automatically get you to liberalism / liberal humanism / humanism. So, and that's kind of where they're trying to bridge that gap of how you get from, okay, here's all these facts to how we should act. And a lot of that is what Jenna was saying. Although I want to hear for a minute from Jonathan, because this is kind of on the subject he was getting at largely from Brett Weinstein's comments.
Maybe I can clarify that as a question even more precisely, which is, how do you get past the is-ought dilemma? So, given the facts of reality, how do you actually go from them to this is how you should act, this is the values that we should have,
right?
And So the is-ought dilemma to me is like that's the core of where they stopped, because that's what Jordan was trying to pressure him on. So I guess I would be curious to hear everyone's thoughts on how you view the is-ought dilemma and how you get past it, or if you get past it at all.
There is no ought way to be a human. That's the beautiful part about being a human. You are who you are. Shine in your own wavelength. There's no top-down approval thing that you need to verify that you're an official, real human with valuable insight. I mean, fuck that whole noise. I mean, this is why I'm trying to dismantle that whole thing and bring everybody into this, regardless of their educational background or cultural indoctrination. It's about bringing everybody to this process because everybody kind of wields the same power. You know, in this domain, some people will have strengths, certainly, but it is ultimately Darwinian, which is the thing that we're trying to do is apply a Darwinian control set to our political discourse, because that's the thing that's breaking everything apart, because all the bad ideas are spreading like cancer. They're tearing us apart. We don't have enough good ideas kind of spreading and flourishing and quashing out the bad ideas. We have a bunch of bad incentives within our media that are amplifying the worst of the worst. Our control structure, top-down control structure from the government level, is there's a whole bunch of corruption and shit level there. Let alone fucking global politics and trying to think about like foreign and domestic shit. I mean, it's just it's insane.
I'll just sort of clarify that I think whether you are consciously saying it or not, what is that somehow everybody gets to this idea of humanism, whether you want to call it liberalism or humanism or liberal humanism. At some point, we all kind of consciously or unconsciously get to that philosophy, and I would say that is one of our, or maybe the core built-in innate potentiality that we're born with, which kind of goes into the golden rule and some of those very core principles of big philosophies.
It's
and
pre-existing. It's not even a thing that it's not even a philosophy or an anything. It's something that you like. If you were born on this planet and you used to be a kid once, you have it inside of you. It's not even like a thing that's there. It's a pre-existing human condition.
Well, it's a condition. It's a condition of our mind, our brain, you could say, and also of our environment. And we may not understand it, and then maybe the process of maturing individually and as cultures or a culture, and that we more and more understand that, which is akin to the Logos, which isn't necessarily just a Christian thing. It's just kind of is. But that thing has been an all pre-Christian philosophies, religions, ideologies around the world for roughly all of known human history, which is really where we've got to get. And then and I want to hear more from other people. But like I was saying, the issue is that sort of resolves the ought-is situation. It's just really complicated. But the tricky thing,
Stephen Wood.
Go ahead.
Do you know Rationality Rules, that YouTube channel? You might, Jenner. It's Stephen Woodford. He calls them axiomatic oughts, which are oughts that are axioms that are taken to be true, that are not taken because of any kind of moral philosophy or anything. They're built into us. So, for example, the drive to, I should go get food when I'm hungry. That's an axiomatic ought. It's the same thing with the putting your hand on the stove bit. And that it might be related to that, because once you have that ground base of, we're not blank slates, then from that and from culture, you derive, we can derive a way to live in the world because we already have certain innate goals that we're born with.
This is the scale problem that comes up when people criticize Sam Harris's moral landscape. Because they're like saying, oh, you are saying flat out, just as true as 2 + 2 = 4, you're saying this state of being a human being is better than that state, and it's really not that materialistic. I don't think Sam is that materialistic. I'm not that materialistic. I'm, fairly inside for my own, introspective. That's where most of my shit comes from. It doesn't come from out there. It comes from,
and I'll say
process.
on that real quick. That's I think what I was trying to get at, and what I think Jordan and Sam were trying to get at, is the idea that sort of what I was saying in just a second, but the idea that it as a if you're gonna say, okay, I'm a atheist, that's fine, no problem. But to get from just being an atheist to getting to having the morality of the moral landscape / humanism, liberalism, it's not automatic. Now,
what,
on the
what
other,
does that even mean to be an atheist? Because I'm not an atheist. That's a tribal identifier. I mean,
Sure.
much of the problem is just getting rid of those and treating
maybe
each
this
other
is
as individuals.
Maybe this is the language to save it all. Is that and this is maybe where they should have clarified, or even Sam or anybody else, and not to put them down, but the clarification. And Pinker and some others who think along the same lines of Sam Harris will often make this clarification to a large degree, that it's not just that you have a religion or not, but that we all should have this humanism. And sometimes, again, there's different terms that get at that same thing. And I would think that where a lot of people agree, to whatever level, consciously or unconsciously, we all have that, which is sort of the golden rule.
It's not should, it already is.
It is, and maybe that's where they needed to clarify to kind of save what they were trying to do.
The thing that I'm talking about is the moral compass, as we've been calling it, is already there. And this is why I invoke the ancient Egyptian underworld of the duat, where your heart is weighed against the feather, because it's something that's already inside you. You carry it with your entire life. You know if something is a sin or not. This is the internality part of it that I keep trying to drive home, is that you already know, and that's where the best insight's going to come from. It's from within.
Yeah, I think Milo has something to say.
Yeah, I fundamentally kind of see it in Jungian terms, which I think aligns with JP, and in the sense that we have this archetypal structure in the psyche, and there's in that there's the self that's deep down in our some people call it your true self. And Jung described it as kind of the unifying principle inside of us, the thing that initially in our younger years, our ego, our conscious self, the thing that's the center of gravity, and everything circles around that. But as you mature, you start to pay attention to this deeper part of yourself that's deep down in, that's not the equal to your conscious self, and it has its own gravitational pull, and it has its unifying factor, and things get pulled into its orbit, and things begin to become organized around it, and I think that fundamental aspect of the psyche, that part of ourselves that's drawing, that needs unity in the self and integration in the self. It pulls things into its orbit, and it becomes like it's like Jung would talk about it in alchemical terms of of combining opposites and bringing unity and integrating different aspects of ourselves and becoming whole. And I think that is fundamentally part of everybody's psyche, whether we want to recognize it or not. And I think that is the when a Christian or a Muslim talks about God, God is that unifying principle that brings everything else into order. Jung would talk about it in terms of the self, but he was open to the idea that it was God. He just said he couldn't because of his position as a empirical psychologist. He wasn't going to make any judgments as to what it was. But
well, either way, we're figuring it out. Whether you want to call that a matter of expanding consciousness or, to some degree, expanding faith. But I would say it real quick to kind of like bring the metaphor together. Originally everyone was flat earthers, whether however many hundreds or thousands of years ago, everyone believed the earth was flat, and that over that flat earth there was a dome that just circled around this flat earth. And the reason that is because empirically,
sorry,
you can clarify that in a minute, but whether you want to say that was some people or the majority of people, but for the most part, we believed as a species, however many hundreds or thousands of years ago, or even if we're not going to say flat earth, we believed in a
orthodoxy.
We believed in a geocentric universe.
Geocentric orthodoxy.
Right. So a lot of people, whether you want to say it's a high percentage or the vast majority, we believed that the earth was the center of the universe. And then over time, then we realized, oh no, it's the sun. And then we realized, oh no, it's a black hole. Then we realized, oh no, it's a supermassive black hole. And all this, it's the same thing as I believe when we're young, we're building our ego, which is sort of our center of consciousness. And then throughout our growing into mature adults, not just regular adults like we're 18, but mature adults like we might become as we are in our 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, is we realize it's not just about us and our center of consciousness. It's about the whole nation and world and everybody else harmonizing and coming together with all the people and nature and the cosmos and everything else. And then you sort of and as you include all the other consciousness and people to whatever degree that you can, that's to at least a large degree what humanism is, where it's all about consciousness and the individual consciousness first and foremost, and that's how that we come to a better understanding of truth and, in particular, morality, how that we order our societies. But I don't know. It sounds like Jenner had a point to clarify on that or two.
Well, you guys, and I'm tying this back kind of in a big way because, and also you should know this, that I am not any kind of believer or anything, but there is something in the Gospel of Thomas that was left out of the Bible that is kind of really gets to this. Not a reader. Gospel of Thomas 49. Jesus said, "Blessed are the solitary and elect, for you will find the kingdom, for you are from it, and for you will return. If they say to you, from where did you come? Say to them, we came from the light." The place where light came into being on its own accord and established itself and became manifest through their image. If they say to you, is it you? Say, we are its children. We are the elect of the living Father. If they say, what is the sign of the Father in you? Say to them, it is movement and repose. Important part. 51 into 52 is the really fucking important part. I know I'm kind of like, guys, still. When will the repose of the dead come, and when will the new world come? He said to them, what you look forward to has already come, but you do not recognize it. His disciples said, 24 prophets came to Israel, and all of them spoke in you. He said to them, guys, the thing I'm saying to you, dang, You have omitted the one living in your presence and have spoken only of the dead. That is the thing that if I have a point to drive home for you guys, it's that Sam and Jordan are fantastic. They are brilliant prophets of Israel who will go down in the freaking books, but whatever. My point here is to remind you, specifically Milo, Jonathan, Hilo, hey. I'm saying you have a chapter to write as well. Isaac
Will do.
also,
Yeah.
duh, for sure. My thing is getting back to those roots, is that even when, if you accept that Jesus was a person who walked the earth and taught his thing, and that's why people follow that, if you accept that, it's like that was just like he was it, that was never the mission. It was never to follow him. It was never to worship. If you're doing that, you're missing the point, because it was about doing the process. It was about living as that, living like that, reaching out to other people like that, bridging the gap, building bridges, and trying to understand each other, because that's what the mission is. Because we're all coming from different worlds, we're all speaking different languages, but we're all doing the same thing. The ones who find each other, we're doing the same thing. And I think finding strength in that, whatever language we find to use that in, is why I'm here. So
Cool. Jonathan, anything you want to add on that? I mean, I think we're trying to get at the same thing, which is similar to this idea of how, like you were saying, how we get from an ought to is, or is to ought, which is because we have all these things going on, then how do we act? And sort of the answer, which can be said almost simply, but is complicated, is the humanism / liberalism / liberal humanism idea, which is that the ordering principle is inside each individual, not just one individual, but each individual. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add on that, because that's kind of like our main thing we've been trying to get at, and I want to hear from you a little bit more.
Right. It's just in us because we evolved with it. So there's already a precedent for those behaviors, those archetypes, in the mind. So yeah, that's I was figuring that's where we would go.
Yeah, and that is sort of this where Jordan was trying to get. I think where they're trying to get, and Brett and everybody else, is that okay, this evolved in us for however many billions of years, or at least millions of years, whatever we want to call it, over a long period of time. But as that it came into our being, we didn't at least consciously have this understanding of science. We may have on some unconscious level when we're deciding, like A/B testing / scientific method before we knew what it was, of saying, let's use this kind of axe and not this kind of axe. Let's domesticate fire this way, not that way. Let's behave this way, not that way. And so we originally, because we didn't know what was going on, we used stories and metaphors and symbolism to deal with that. And so this is kind of like, I think maybe the last point we want to try to get to before we might get to some of the comments, which was the idea of now we've been using these stories / metaphors / symbols for a long time. And to a large degree, those are helpful, but to a large degree, we just need to understand better how to use them. And what we talked about a little bit last time was the idea of, like, maybe because those have kind of screwed up sometimes, we want to use different ones. Like Jeff was with us last time talking about, maybe use Disney or this or that. And there may be some good ideas to that, but I would kind of say to that, which is another point I want to add, was that because and this is, I think, what Jordan was trying to get at, and they were trying to get at in the debate, was because we've used certain ones for roughly at least thousands of years, maybe on some different various forms for, to some degree, all of our human history, we've learned how to use them and how to not use them. Like we got into the idea a little bit last time of how like, oh, if we wanted to say, oh, that one screwed up, so let's just trash it and use this one, Disney or whatever.
Yes.
It's in a lot of ways that I think Jordan would argue it's better to perhaps better use what we've already had, largely because we've already gone through the mistakes of it. Not to say that because we've gone through the mistakes of Islam or Christianity or Buddhism or whatever else that justifies their mistakes, but now we know how to better use that metaphorical tool or psychological tool or whatever you want to call it. And I think all of you guys have got things you want to jump in on. So hold those thoughts and get yours briefly and hold yours for a second, Milo. Go ahead.
I have to get this in because I think this is on a fundamental level, on a structural level, as to how we're actually thinking at the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are kind of, whether it's subconscious or not, we are kind of thinking of this as a top-down problem, where it's like, well,
Jordan even mentioned that it was bottom up. I mean, I don't.
Right. Although I would clarify that I believe, and I think most people believe on whatever level, that it is both. To whatever degree that we believe that there's that always going on both ways.
I don't think it's
maybe not consciously, but it is
consciously.
both.
Almost nobody gets this, but I don't know. But it's think both. My point to play
interaction
in this story is on the bottom up part, because the top down part does not do enough. No matter how loud we get, there's always going to be some louder asshole who is giving worse information, who's sucking people into another ideological black hole. And what we're trying to do here is not suck people into an ideology. It's really to empower them to think for themselves and to realize their own power. It's not about finding power in a tribe that already exists out there. Like, hey guys, come into our cool kids club. You can be one of us. It's like, no, you can be a leader. You can lead your own thing. This is extremely about, in the individual portion of it, which I'm not going to go to the lengths to say that like people are inherently good. That's clearly not true. But culture
we have the potential to be good and evil, for sure.
Right.
Of course. This is yin and yang. It's the light and the dark and the light. Yeah. It's like we have the potential to be both.
And everything in the
personal level, it's just like navigating the waters, and that's all we're here to do. We're just here to navigate
so
the waters.
let me clarify something there, and then I want to hear from Milo too, because I think he had something to say. But I think this is really important when you're saying people don't know this, but and this is where I feel like this is another point that we may not get into or barely get into. We'll probably transition to getting into when we do this talk again, maybe the next week or two, which is the idea of what really matters is how you act. So in other words, I believe, and I think most people believe on whatever level, consciously or unconsciously, is that we are all, to a large degree, or at least the vast majority of people believe that we are humanist / liberal humanist / in the liberalism. And whenever I say liberalism, I'm not talking political liberalism. I'm talking about humanism. But
you need a shortcut for that phrase.
Stop using labels. Seriously, the second you ditch the labels and just start talking what you're actually talking about.
Well, it's because maybe I'll post something and we'll try to get into this next time. But I'll post where Yuval Noah Harari talked about it a couple times, and or Pinker, which is this idea that that is kind of like the central theme of all what we're talking about here, and that it has the label of it has been debated on for basically forever, but it's the same meaning. And in our modern vocabulary, we would call it those three different things. But at least according to Yuval Noah Harari and a lot of similar thinkers, the name for it is liberalism, but really it's tricky using that term because people automatically think political liberalism, but probably the more apt term, because it makes more sense the way that people use it, is humanism. So I guess going forward, we'll, for the most part, use the word humanism, which is the idea that inside every individual has this ordering principle of how to act in the world, and that's very important. And it's something like divinity, but not necessarily.
It is, but there's a huge thing there, because there can't be any kind of dogmatic. This is what it means to be a human.
The dogma,
even putting a
the dogma
word
comes
like
from
humanism,
inside out.
Well, no, I know, but even putting a word like humanism to it is just like, this is how huge.
Well, what it is
act.
it's almost like
it's like it needs to be a core inside, core out
right.
thing. It
and
can't
maybe
be.
that's where
we can't
like
label
a lot of
it.
the
There's no label. We just have to tell
Sure.
everybody that they're special. We just have to be
Here,
Mr. Rogers and
sure.
Bob
I think-
Ross
sure.
and
Hey.
Carl Sagan, and go into their fucking kids' room and tell them that their Lego castle is the coolest thing that you've ever seen. We just have to be so special and remind every single walking adult on this earth, like they are the
Let-
littlest children. We just have to remind
Milo
them
has
of
a
how
point to
special
make that I want to hear,
they
but
are.
Yeah,
I see what
maybe-
you're saying, but go ahead, Milo.
I think I can tie some of this all up together.
Sure.
When like Jordan would say that there's an infinite number of facts. So
Yeah.
some of these facts are going to be compelling to us as individuals for whatever reason. What makes them compelling, I think, is what Jordan was trying to get at, that there's something in us that makes certain facts more compelling than other facts. And we're drawn to certain other facts. And I think I would tie this to this ordering principle, the center of ourselves that kind of draws things within its orbit. And that can be our ego, which, it's going to draw certain things into its orbit. I mean, if you're like, want to be a millionaire and all you think about is real estate, you're going to draw things about real estate and making money and stock market. That's all that you're going to revolve around. Those are the kind of facts that you're going to be attracted to. So there's something in us that centers us, and it can be something, whatever it is, it's going to draw certain us to certain facts that are going to constellate. And as these facts start to constellate, I think what Jordan Peterson is that you start to see narratives start to develop. And they start to collect around certain things and ideas, and these are the things from which myths are born. These are the things from which religions are born. Yeah. And it's because through and they're refined over the centuries too, and our psyche so I think what happens is then these things. This collective experience of these what Jung would say would be archetypal, that are deeply rooted in everybody's psyche. They resonate with certain archetypal things deep in us. From a Christian standpoint, you might even call that the image of God. We're created in the image of God. You don't have to accept that premise, but that could be one way that somebody might take this in. But and so certain things constellate. That is, that they're attracted to certain these core elements of yourself. These narratives start to develop, and those narratives, they become, when people are not connected to they're not truly connected to a true spirituality. They're just connected to these narratives as a dogma. They're only seeing the surface. Now, the key to this, I think, is to look at these dogmas not as straight up rules, but these are maps. And if you treat them as maps, they're not. Then what happens, I think, with the problem with dogma is when dogma isn't a map, it's self-perpetuating. The dogma exists for the dogma. But if the dogma is treated as a map, then it ceases to have this control element anymore.
Well, and
Now it's your journey to use the map to the experience.
yeah,
And
yeah, go ahead.
so we can ride on the backs of the great men and women of the past and the traditions of the past. But sometimes, we've got a really bad taste in our mouth because people who don't know how to handle traditions, they treat them very literally, matter of factly, and they're when they become separated from the experience, they solidify and become a self-perpetuating entity, and that's where you get more of that. You get a lot of problems in that realm.
Well, and I'll clarify that too. That what ultimately matters, and I think this is the unifying sort of principles. All this is, you can have all this talk, you can have all these symbolism and religion and science and facts and everything else, and you can talk about it for hours and hours and days and centuries or millennia. But what ultimately matters is what people act out, and which is a lot of the discussion they were trying to get into, but it got tricky, and we'll probably try to get into that a little bit next time, because we're gonna wrap this up in the next, I don't know, 5 or 10, 20 minutes or so. But what kind of constitutes everything is how that we ultimately act. So we have all these facts and ideas and principles and stories, but then ultimately we act one way. And one principle or one thing I'd like to mention on that is, like, it's such a big deal now, and I don't think it's talked about enough, that right now, whether you use the dark web or you use whatever trickery that we can now, it's like anybody can do almost anything. Anybody can get any drugs or any substance to come to them in the mail or whatever else. You might have to use a little bit more know how to figure it out, whether you use the dark web or whatever else. Anybody can order anybody else to be killed. We're in a day and age where we can do almost anything, whether it's good, evil, or anything in between. But what ultimately matters is how everybody acts out what they act out. And for the most part, they're acting out this idea of humanism, which is we all want to get along and we all want to figure out how to better get along. We all want to make a better tomorrow, which is something I want to get into a little bit. One of the questions of, like, what's the ultimate authority? The ultimate authority, I would say, is like our future selves in the future world, our future children, or future children's selves, and making a better world for everybody. And I think Jenna has something to say, so we'll go to that, and then we'll start to somewhat wrap it up if we can.
Well, I don't know. It's framing wise.
Sure.
I find this a very uncomfortable place to be like, this is how people should act.
No, what I'm saying is how they do act is what matters.
Well, of course it is. Of course it is. This is all about the individual. This has always been about the individual person, which trying to detach the cultural things that we apply to individuals. That's been my biggest challenge, is just getting them out of the way and getting to know people as people, because that's where the magic is.
And that's part of how you're acting compared to other ways that you could act.
The cultural boxes, I mean, they don't fit, man. They sure as fuck don't fit me. There's no cultural box I can jump in and say, hey, kids, I'm one of these. Come subscribe to my show. I don't have one of those. Like, that's not a thing. And that's how it is for most people. Most people feel like they don't have any kind of role to play in this kind of discourse. It's very... Oopsie. It's very much... New mic stand. It's very much a, like, ivory tower, let me look up at what the smart people are saying and figure out how I can better run my life, where, like, really I'm taking this not ground up, but, like, middle out is really the way that I'm thinking of it, because you guys already all have individually your power, your own part to add to this that builds on that. It was never about looking up at the glorious towers that the ivory tower elite academics built for us. It was about like, hey, well, we have our little plot over here. Let's see what we can build. Let's do something bigger. Let's do something better. Let's see what we have to add to this story, because it was never about them. It was,
yeah, and I think it's just like I was saying. I think it's the tricky answer that's simple yet infinitely complex is that humanism is ultimately that centered ordering principle, but the language around it is ultimately super complex. But again, the point that I would make, and then I'll try to hear from you guys, and we'll start to wrap it up, is this, and we may get to the comments just a little bit, and then we may transition that to when we have this talk again, hopefully the next week or two. But right now, it's just the idea of how someone acts, and this is also on the idea of what we originally were going into, of metaphorical versus literal truth, is you might behave one way if there's a God, and you might behave another way if there's no God, although coming to that understanding might be coming to the understanding of humanism, so to speak. But sometimes it's tricky to say all atheists automatically become humanist, although that might have been what Sam Harris should have said or wanted to say but couldn't. But it's tricky. I don't know if Jonathan or anybody wants to clarify that, and then we'll start to wrap it up with everybody. Anybody?
I don't know. I mean, so you're talking about how, okay, if you suddenly stop believing in God, suddenly you're a humanist or whatever, and I don't think that's. Let me clarify what you meant by that.
Okay, so so I would say that for the most part, everybody / the vast majority of people are humanist, which is this idea that every individual consciousness is important.
Right. That's one of the non-blank. That's one of the axiomatic oughts that we carry.
Right.
That we inherited. Right.
Which includes that we are not sheep, and we don't need a
Right.
top-down ideological dogma to adhere to be real humans, which has been my whole part.
Which I think
I'm gonna shut
that's
up.
Another...
That's my dog in this fight.
Right. Which I think is
And
another
it's
largely
gonna
agreed
tear your
upon
little
thing.
portal apart.
Which I think is another largely agreed upon thing. Although the tricky thing about that is that's probably true maybe for everybody or the vast majority of people, although they may need to come to that realization. And it's not necessarily because that they were raised up necessarily need dogma or whatever, but it's because we start having to figure this stuff out when we are children. And to tell a child, whether they're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever years old, like humanism, and not only when we're children, but also when we're young adults in our 20s or whatever, it's tricky. And that's where some of these stories have helped over the generations. And that's what we're trying to figure out in all of these related type conversations.
Of course, we just need to be very clear that, like, we're not replacing bad dogma with new dogma. We're replacing it with
we're refining what's always been there.
Yes,
I would say
within them, an existing human thing within the human experience, pre-existing. It's not a top-down thing that's given. It's something that's inside that's brought out. I think that is fundamental, because if we frame this at all as like, we're the new smart people, we're going to tell you how to live, I think that is going to fail miserably.
Yeah.
Well, I think, like what you're saying is that, nothing is obtained by force. Anything that's attained by force,
the reasons are already there.
It's you've not gained anything. You can't. You can. If I get you to believe what I believe and use force to do it, I've gained nothing, because you were forced to. Only something that's been voluntarily adhered to has any weight, has any value, has any purpose. force is a non-starter. It creates nothing. In fact, all it does is
It's
injure.
not even about force. It's just about like who you are in your heart, whether you really believe something or whether you're being sucked into a movement. Which is why I'm not trying to create a movement. This isn't a political action committee that's trying to make political change. It's really about detaching it from the hierarchy that is the quote smartest people on this stuff and really creating a kind of growth network, a growth hierarchy off of the people who also want to engage in this stuff and aren't, aren't aspiring to be a thing on the ladder that's going to universities and saying, "Hey, kids." It's kind of that. It's bringing it down to this level, which is where it belongs.
I like that growth hierarchy.
Yeah.
Hierarchy. Yeah,
I've been talking about growth hierarchies this whole motherfucking time. Nobody wants to talk about growth hierarchies. Everybody's talking about Jordan Peterson. Fuck, everybody's talking about dominance hierarchies. I'm like, holy fuck, does anybody want to talk about fucking growth hierarchies? Milo,
I think that's a
your
language
name down.
issue too. Like even I think Jordan Peterson. I would like to. That's maybe one thing he should clarify. But I think what he's getting at with those hierarchies, and maybe it's another thing we can come back to when we have this discussion again in the next week or two, is like what he's getting at is that those hierarchies, whether we call them growth or dominance or a combination of the two, they are important because you've got a lot of young people that will come up with some random idea that they came up with, like Marxism or cultural Marxism or whatever, and there's some truth to that, and then they're like, yeah, I figured it out. Everybody needs to be a socialist and whatever else, and let's not let anybody speak because we figured out this thing or that thing. And there's some truth to that, and they need to like deal with that in their space and hopefully read a lot of history to figure those things out. And although this is a lot of the issue that I think a lot of people were getting at too, is that originally what universities, at least on the humanities end of it, at least that, when a university would, you'd get a young university student in their teens and 20s or whatever, it was to not just teach them cultural Marxism or facts. It was to help them to realize what this world is that we were born into, and the world that we were born into,
to empower.
So
you teach a kid to learn, not to.
Right, you teach them how to think, how to behave, or not necessarily how to behave, but how to figure things out, how to behave,
how to figure the world out. Because we're all born into the world, looking up and going, "What the fuck is that? Oh my gosh." Let's bring this together. We all have this in us naturally, and it's beaten out of us by culture. And we need to stop that. We need to stop it immediately.
Right, and that was originally how the universities were supposed to be. Yeah,
I have my own criticisms of education, but this is getting a little side topic now because I'm starting to get a lot more questions based on like education and teaching and stuff and movements. But it's already 2:23 in, so do you want to save that or?
Well, I say we save that because I'd like to talk about education and and we need more time than this. There's a lot to say here. I have a few cents on that topic myself.
We'll wrap it up. Those are a bunch of good. So next time we'll talk about education, how you act, and how maybe the universities were supposed to resolve that, and we'll also talk about some of these things that we're getting to now. I did want to get to some of these comments, but I think we're going to have to save that for next time. Some of that we already kind of got to, but some of that's a little tricky with the I'll just put it up on here so we kind of know. It's a little bit tricky, and I wanted to hear from Hilo more anyway, but I don't know if Hilo might want to say something briefly before we wrap it up here in the next couple minutes, because I want to hear from you a little bit more. I don't know if we'll get into all this. We might next time. But go ahead, Hilo.
I feel like this
let
is
me
kind of a
just hear from
fakey-
you for a minute, and then we'll
fakey
wrap it up
question, but-
and go on this
Jenner.
in a week or
It
two.
triggered me when Milo said that there's no such thing that you can force an idea on something. And an idea that so many people has is that Islam is forcing. It's people has to force it onto people, and the book itself, the Quran, says God himself, like I believe, says there's no compulsion in religion. Really,
Thank you.
in religion.
I can't say that my skin is too white.
Yeah, religion. It's a way of life. There's no compulsion how you live. That's it. That's what triggered me.
Okay. That's a good summary.
It's a great way to end. That was awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So, I don't know if anybody else has anything to add real quick, and then we'll just wrap it up, and we'll talk in the group message about either doing this probably next Thursday or whatever time works for us in about a week-ish.
Well,
but does anybody else have anything to add real quick before we wrap it up?
well, were you gonna mention the thing?
I'm sorry, which one?
The thing, the podcast thing.
I don't know. Well, you can mention it, but that's a little bit of a work in progress. But you can mention it, and then
it's exciting, man. You should be exciting about. You should be
I'm excited
about that.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Okay, you guys. So since he's not going to spoil it, Isaac
you can spoil it.
Isaac's brainstorming his own podcast, and I'm helping. We're gonna figure
Yeah.
it out, you guys.
It's complicated, but we're figuring it out.
It's complicated as fuck, you guys, but that's the best part because it takes a long form thing. If you want to get to know any individual, it takes like a good couple hours of unpacking that shit, like kind of in a closed space. It's quiet and like, hey, let's hang out. Let's get to know each other. So, I'm. Oh my god! Were you not ready to drop that? I'm sorry.
Oh, I mean, I sort of have, but it's a matter of working out some of the technical details and whatnot. Maybe we'll talk about that.
On the technical, I got you on the technical side. No. On the actual on that side, I got you.
There will be
great.
Legitimate podcast coming in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, guys.
But we'll work out those details soon.
Are you kidding me? It's gonna be so fun. Please fucking stay tuned. If you've been tuned in, if you watch this the whole time, I have not been reading the comments. I'm usually bitter about that. But thank you for participating in this because I'm gonna do my fucking darndest. I'm gonna work my tits off to fucking get Isaac's show off the ground as an actual podcast, a long form shit that can literally bring cosmic fire to Rogan to be like, oh, you think you have a podcast? Here I come, motherfucker. Coming in with the fire and bringing something different and fresh and talking to beautiful people like you, Milo, and Jonathan, and Hilo.
I'll wait for you to invite Alex Jones on your podcast.
Yeah.
God damn. I
First
want
one's gonna be Alex Jones.
Can I say I want all three of you on my show? Can I say that now? Just go mindwave.media. Just contact me. Just like get on my list.
Yeah,
I have
he's got a group and a page and all that.
Sure.
But I want all you guys on my roster because oh man, it's have you guys seen the Lego movie? It's it's that. It really is that. It's like everything is awesome, and it's only because we're all together and we're all so different, and we also have such unique, beautiful stories to tell. And it's only by bringing them together we'll live it forever because everything is awesome. That's Jenner. That's Mindwave. Mindwave.media. Peace out, motherfuckers. That's
okay.
I had to put a closeout somewhere, so yes.
There you go. All right, Jonathan or Milo or anybody, Hilo, have anything to add before we wrap it up?
I think I'm good. I'll save what's left in my head for the next one.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, same.
We'll talk about it in the group thing, and in about a week-ish, we'll get together and do it again. But I think that's it. All right, guys. Thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you again in about a week. So cool.
All
Thanks a
right.
lot.
Peace.
Peace.